office naps, hey?
I got to survive any way I can.
Yeah,
Sleep is
exactly.
important.
This big bad world. All right, guys, welcome to the Chief Life Podcast. I'm Matthias Turner, joined by co-host Stacey Lee Turner.
Hey guys.
And today we're super pumped. We've got Dr. Tom Incledon on the line. Tom, welcome.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Very well, thank you. So, like I was saying before, I've kind of followed you for a while through the work that you've done with Power Athlete, and they kind of always look at really like your side and your performance work that you do with athletes. So the athletes you've kind of worked with throughout the NFL and NBL, MMA, CrossFit, all different types of sports. You're helping athletes kind of achieve their best state as well as keeping to a healthy level, not just performing and running themselves down. You also have your center, which is called the Corzenta Center, and with that, you guys kind of deal with all people, right? Like athletes through to people who have cancer or people who have disease in general, and trying to help them out. Can you kind of give us the other thing I think we should mention is that you're an absolute badass in the gym, boasting over a 600-pound deadlift. Like what did you say? You've got 5 world records. You've set 5 records.
Yeah.
I said world records in different strength sports, but the joke that we have is no brain, no pain.
So does that mean you get a lot of pain then? Because you're a smart
No,
guy.
it just means I can lift a lot of weights because I can't feel it crushing my bones.
You also said before we started recording you're half meathead, half scientist, which I love.
Yeah.
So I wanted to share that with the listeners.
And
What's
so,
important,
yeah, exactly. So CEO and founder of Corzenta. What is Corzenta? What do you guys do?
So it started out as human performance specialist, and back then I was mostly a writer, and I was designing. I did mostly like paperwork, wrote for every major health and fitness magazine and website, and then started designing exercise programs. And then as time went on, the clients I was serving, they would have an obstacle, and it couldn't be addressed in their training environment or in the, let's say, the doctor's office. And so I realized, okay, then I have to start providing that service so I have better control. And then we started getting athletes flying in from around the world to the center to come in and get evaluated. We didn't do a lot of training per se. It was mostly evaluation, and I would give feedback to the coach or to the doctor or therapist that referred them. Mm. And then a lot of those guys started getting, as the years would go on, I'm not saying I'm old, but I've been doing this for a long time. So let's just say I'm still young, okay? And, now I've got, 2 and 3 generations of people that I'm helping, so it's like their kids and their kids' kids type of thing. And we start seeing some guys are getting cancer or arthritis or diabetes because, your lifestyle's different when you're in your 20s and 30s competing in a sport versus your 60s when you have grandkids, type of thing. And so we started getting more of our relationships, mostly shifting more about dealing with disease. And our clients would say, you're the only guys that figured out the root cause of my issues. So because they kept using that phrase so often, we were looking at the intellectual property. Can we trademark it and do some things with branding? And Corzenta, no one was using that. No one's even knew what it meant. And so it was kind of like open, for it. So we locked up all the intellectual property and started coming out with all these systems to make it easier to diagnose what's going on inside of someone and then address it and then, help them performing better, whether it's like people that have cancer that can't walk, now they're walking and running, or if it's an athlete that's trying to set a world record, they could set a better world record or, improve their performance.
Yeah, it's really, really important. I think, like you said, just finding that cause and being able to help someone from a deeper level. And unfortunately, the conventional practice right now is not that. It's like 15 minutes, get you in, get you out, and keep you moving.
Give you a Band-Aid solution.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you started within the conventional system, I would believe, and then you've kind of found not that it's unconventional, but you've spread your wings to kind of look at other methods as well. To start with, was it kind of like, I guess almost like you shouldn't do that? Like, hey, there's this thing that you can go and practice that might be able to help people, but it's not conventional, so maybe you shouldn't actually look into that. Was that the kind of mind frame around it for the, I guess, the community or the center in general?
Well, when I started Western medicine, I was really fortunate because I was around some of the brightest minds in the world in exercise physiology, specifically with endocrine responses to resistance exercise.
Okay.
So we basically studied hormones from guys that lift weights,
Yeah.
But we leveraged that info to make average women stronger than men. We could take men over 100 years of age and add muscle to them, and we could stage 4 cancer patients out of wheelchairs and looking great. So just from lifting weights alone and nothing else, we got really impressive results. The challenge for me, though, back then is, imagine I'm going to my research lab, but I got some of the smartest guys in exercise physiology, and they're saying things like, oh, you don't need more protein, or you don't need more some B vitamins, etc. And then I'm training with these Olympians, and I'm looking at these guys pounding protein and B vitamins, and they're getting bigger and stronger. And back, some of the doctors were just really wimpy, and I would say, why don't you try what these guys are doing? Because they're growing and you're not growing. Just try it.
Yeah.
And as shocking as it may seem, was that the smart guys were resistant to change. And so what I learned from that is, sometimes really smart people can be wrong, and sometimes really dumb people could be right. So in the end, you got to still kind of figure things out for yourself,
Yeah.
And so I started doing some things, and I started getting really strong and bigger. And then, of course, all the guys around me, would they say, oh, you must be on steroids. You can't get big, literally. And I was like, well, but you haven't tried, so how would you know? And then I took a bicyclist that weighed 130 pounds in our lab, and I got him to 210 pounds, and he was very lean. And after that, then everybody wanted to know what I was doing because I could put muscle on a skinny guy,
So for the listeners, that's like just under 60 kilos up to just
about
under
90.
95. So that's awesome. What was the time span on that?
About 3 months.
Wow.
I took a guy that was, a lot of cyclists are they're very catabolic because of the volume of activity they do.
Yeah.
So once we reduced that excess activity and started giving him more protein, and then started giving him more strength training. He didn't lift weights before, and now he's lifting weights. So we changed from the modality from cycling to lifting weights, and that obviously had a lot of impact. And then I fed him like crazy.
And so there's actually a study that was released recently, and I think there's beautiful things about studies as well as things that you can kind of pick apart with bits and pieces, because they obviously take a special group and they introduce something, and then they'll take one part of the best part of that away. And so this thing was with protein, and they said, hey, when you have protein, you can gain size. And it's like, okay, obvious. But what they found is that over 1.6 grams of protein per body kilo, so I'm not quite sure, about 2.2 pounds, it works out that if you go above that your body actually doesn't use the protein. They didn't say what the body does with the protein. I would assume piss it out and not use it. But did you find throughout using, I guess, just working with different types of people, that there was a different level for each person, like where their protein level sat?
Yeah. So the thing you got to keep in mind is in a study, there's only so many controls, right? And it's different than like in the free world. Let's say you're training for the Olympics and your goal is to win. You're not waiting 8 to 20 years for a new study to come out to teach you something. You get, if you're around a group of men or women that are training, you get to see who's responding and who's not responding, and you could try copying what they're doing. That's certainly not the optimal way, but it's a way to short track a lot of things. And one of the things I can tell you about protein intake and let's say muscle protein metabolism is there are ways to acutely change things. So ultimately, you might say the final rate-limiting step would be tissue utilization, meaning, let's say I pound 100 grams right now, we have the physical ability to digest it all. But once it gets into the blood, not all 100 grams will be utilized right away.
Yeah.
Some of those amino acids will be broken down into carbon skeletons. That's going to go down different pathways for gluconeogenesis or lipogenesis or something like that. But under acute conditions, we could do things with certain treatments. So I could do, for example, certain sauna therapies or certain things with heat. So it could be dry heat or wet heat, like in a hot tub or something.
Yeah.
And I could dramatically increase growth hormone and testosterone levels prior to going into, let's say, an exercise event. And then if I time the introduction of amino acids, I could dramatically increase the uptake of amino acids in the muscles that were working. And then if I interface things like blood flow restriction training, like alternative stuff like that. So I've tested systems that, were in the thousands and thousands of dollars range. And in the end, we use, for most people, we use systems that you could buy. I could treat 6 people for about $16 US.
Yeah.
And so when you're measuring things, you can see how much you actually need, right, to get that boost. So practically, just by someone coming here, for example, I could save them thousands of dollars of wasted money on stuff that wouldn't be needed, So it makes me free then.
It's a good way to place it. And so I think when you're looking at sport in general, people can always benefit from being stronger across the board. Usually when athletes are stronger, and it's not always the way, but when athletes are stronger, they're usually a better performer to some extent. When people come to you and say, for instance, they're not really willing to change their training, but they want to get stronger, what protocol do you kind of hit them with for nutrition? Is it like, let's increase your protein, or let's increase your carbs, or I guess once again,
mindset.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so like I mentioned earlier, how some of the doctors and scientists were resistant to change. I've worked with a lot of world champions that had a philosophy, before they walked through the door, and it's like, I do it this way.
Yeah.
So on one hand, they want help breaking through a barrier of some kind, a ceiling of some kind. On the other hand, they're afraid to let go of what they were doing. But the reality is, you have to change to get better, right? You can't do the same thing, because that by definition means you won't change.
Sandy, right?
I've frustrated, upset many people. I can tell you, like most of the time, the biggest impact for helping someone right away is looking at the nervous system, so looking at how does the brain control the rest of the body. I can help someone set a world record in maybe seconds to minutes using techniques like that. But to get them to buy into it initially, it's sometimes very challenging. Like the bigger battle is the mindset than the actual execution of the task, know. And I had a young lady that was she was a world champion CrossFitter, and she was very strong, and she wanted to get stronger. And she came with her husband, and she was so tense. She looked like a wrestler, like from Iowa State, just like all muscle bound and shaking. And so said, I really got to help you to relax, because you cannot be very powerful, very strong, you have good speed if you're tense. You have to be able to relax and flow and be very fluid, so that you can contract rapidly, right? If you're already maximally contracted,
there's no more happening.
If the door's open, you can't open it anymore.
Right. So winds up, she was not too happy at the beginning, but I've recommended some breathing drills to help her. And she set a PR for volume of deadlifting. She weighed about 130 pounds, or so, let's say 60 kilos roughly. And she pulled about 85 kilos for volume, set a new record there. And the next day she set a new PR in the snatch without peaking for the snatch. And so the idea behind that is with the nervous system, if you can't communicate with your body efficiently, then you don't use what you have, right? So even, let's say you're physically stronger than me and you have better favorable attachments and mechanics. If you're using 10% and I'm using 30%, right? I now on the outside, you're not leveraging everything that you have.
Yeah.
So that's normally where I would start. Now, because you asked about the nutrition stuff, normally the way we have a system of basically helping people to dial in stuff that's individualized for them.
Yeah.
But it varies for each person based on how fast they want to do something, how much time they're going to put into it, what their financial resources are, what do they have access back home. We can put together some really high-end nutrition programs, but people may not have, you want to be a prisoner in the kitchen all day long, cooking and preparing stuff, so that's not practical. But we have some clients that have chefs, so then it's easy for them. They just write out what needs to be done, and it's done.
Yeah.
So you have some people that don't have resources, and some people have a lot of resources. General strategy would be first to look at how do we stabilize glucose levels in the body. The rationale for that is it avoids energy swings and things like that.
Yeah.
terms of that strategy, how to stabilize glucose levels, ideally you want to know the microbiome. So you want to know what organisms are in your gut. Some people are resistant to doing stool testing, just the aspect of collecting their stool and
don't want to dig through it.
Yeah. So for some people, like that is blocked immediately, right? Because they just won't do it. And then other people, maybe they can't afford it for whatever reason. But ideally, you want to know what's going on inside of you, because this is where you see very unique things. So, for example, generally speaking, iceberg lettuce is not considered a weight gain food, right? It has minimal calories. It has a lot of indigestible fiber. But that's only if you have a normal microbiome. If you have a microbiome where there's certain organisms that have the cellulase enzyme, that enzyme will break down the cellulose. So imagine it's taking fiber and converting it into sugar. So imagine your client saying, I'm just eating lettuce. And you're like, don't lie to me. They're getting fatter and they're going crazy in their head because they're trying to figure out, how am I gaining weight when I'm hardly eating anything? And the reality is they don't know that there's something else they don't see that's affecting the energy that they get out of that food. So, in theory, you would say calories in, calories out. From a physics perspective, you're not going to violate laws of thermodynamics. But that only holds true when there's nothing other in that interface, right? There's no organisms in there. And in reality now, there's so much change in the environment. There's change in the soil with fulvic acid content and other components. So it's dramatically affected what we're getting from the earth into our body. And then because there's all these, antibiotics, antifungals, all these chemicals that have been introduced in the environment that we may have been exposed to from our parents, during when we were a child, being, in utero, that type of thing, or from just an infection we get treatment, our microbiomes are distorted, and so there's a lot of impact that has on how we get the energy from our food and even what nutrients we get from our food. So in other words, even when we do everything right on paper, it may not be right because there may be something else going on.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys have seen any of some of the studies. There's actually cases where people are eating like healthy fruits and vegetables and getting fatter, and then they switch to junk food and actually get healthier.
Yeah.
And so clearly that's not the message we want to communicate, right? But what it is that under short-term conditions, because of dysfunction in our gut, something that may be wrong may actually be right under those conditions. And the thing would be, the long-term, it's clearly not good for you. It's probably going to be harmful. But how do we correct the microbiome so people get benefits from the healthy foods and don't get like a facade from the junk food,
Yeah, it's super interesting. It's and it really just proves to the point, like, you need to look at whole life picture. You can't just ever be, here's your macronutrients, go and hit that. And that's something that we definitely try to do, is really look at, like, well, what are your stress levels like? What's your sleep levels like? Are you sleeping well? Is your sleep quality actually
getting
good?
Enough water in.
Exactly. Like, do you breathe through your nose, or are you breathing through your mouth? And are you short, shallow breathing always, or do you have long, deep breaths? And do you have time where you focus on your breath? And
we definitely talk about poo.
Yes.
To our clients' dismay.
Yeah, exactly. Something you're well known for is your work with men and men's health in general. Testosterone is obviously a big thing that men kind of go to straight away. And I think you can kind of say I guess one thing I want to talk about is the age card. Like, so many men pull out the age card. Well, when you get to my age, Matty, you'll understand. And it's like, no, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, that's just a story that you're telling yourself. Well, that's just something that you're putting up so you don't have to work any harder than what you already are. Obviously, as you do get older, your testosterone levels do drop, but it can be to a healthy level still. What are the big things that you kind of see that men lack in doing that ruins their testosterone levels?
So, a lot of stuff attributed to aging is, now being rediscovered as really a consequence of inflammation or a consequence of not addressing a problem, right? So imagine if I broke my leg, and we all know it's broken, but I just keep hobbling around on it, right? It gets worse over time, and now I can't walk, and it'd be pretty obvious, right? But what if we're talking about biochemicals inside of me, right, that we can't see?
Yeah.
And I'm ignoring them. And now it's building up, and now, I lose all my hair, and now I'm getting fatter, and now I don't have any testosterone left. If someone was measuring me over time, right, they say, well, Tom, as you got older, your testosterone really plummeted. when we address a lot of these biochemical shortcomings in elderly men or elderly women, you see there's dramatic improvements in their endogenous hormone production, meaning they do improve their ability to make certain hormones. Now, if a gland is gone, let's just say if a woman no longer has ovarian function or if a man no longer has testicular function, then there's ways that the adrenal glands may compensate within a certain range to help produce more androgens or estrogens. That still may not be enough, in which case then they may have to do something exogenous to kind of be where they want to be.
Yeah.
But let's assume that there is healthy glandular function. Then the basic question is, if a hormone goes down, is why did it go down? And then we need to investigate to figure that out. And in some cases, for men, some common things we see, more men than ever have iron problems. Iron is traditionally thought of as a women's, problem, not so much a man, because iron is generally conserved very well inside of our bodies. About 97% is reabsorbed and utilized by the body. Mm-hmm. The exceptions will be if you have blood loss. So for a healthy female that's menstruating, you would expect blood loss and hence more of a concern with iron. But it's surprising to find so many men that have low iron levels. Mm. That contributes to a lot of issues like fatigue and so forth. Some other things would be a self-induced copper deficiency. So a lot of guys read about zinc increasing testosterone, so they pound so much zinc that the excess zinc displaces their copper. So imagine if you did a simple blood test that says copper was normal. So let's say here's a range, and you're somewhere inside of that range with copper. But if your zinc is unusually high, it creates what's called a functional deficiency. So on paper, the excess zinc is kind of interfering with the function of copper. And you could take, very athletic men or that are very motivated, have a lot of ambition. And as the copper deficiency gets worse over time, they can become depressed, lose motivation, eventually become suicidal. Now, to those conditions, most doctors will just put you on medication for your mind, right? They're not thinking, hey, it's a copper problem.
Yeah.
So those get the right help. So there's other things with vitamin A and vitamin D that affect something called a STAR pathway. That's the steroidal acute regulatory gene pathway, which basically looks at how do the testes make testosterone. And so my point, you could probably make the argument all vitamins and minerals are needed to be healthy. What's probably happening is nature already has it figured out, but as we do new studies, we uncover things. It's like, oh, look, this vitamin is linked to, testosterone. Well, it probably always was. We just didn't know about it because no one published the data,
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty powerful, and I think that's why so many people are getting back to whole foods as well, because they're realizing, well, no, you can't just get all the nutrients you need or all the micro, all the everything that you need, minerals and micronutrients that you need from just breads and pastas, unfortunately.
Just pills alone, right?
Yeah.
Nature has molecules that we haven't fully discovered or elucidated yet. So, the idea behind supplementation is really more of an insurance policy, not so much like the driving force. The idea is your diet is the driving force, and then just to be safe, you kind of have a few other things you're doing. There's some things like, there's substances like some of the new NADH and the various forms of NADH. Some things like oxaloacetate or oxalic acid. There's some substances that, for some people, they really seem to be beneficial. But the challenge is that the responses are so extreme. Like one guy could be he could be making incredible progress, another guy that does nothing at all. And then we have the ability to test every single gene in a germline genetics. So we could test all 22,000 genes in someone. And we look at their gene expression, we find that guy that didn't respond, he actually has a mutation in the gene that may involve that substance. So there'd be no way of knowing, because unless you had that genetic testing done, which most people won't, because there's not a reason. Because we're not talking about life and death matters. We're talking about optimal performance, right? And so not everybody's going to want to put the kind of time and money into getting that stuff done. But if you did have it done, it could definitely be incredibly insightful to a certain degree.
Something I've heard you talk about before is vitamin D3 in particular, and making sure that you're getting enough of it. There's a gene that when it doesn't work properly, it stops people from actually even taking in vitamin D from sunlight. They can't produce it from the sunlight. I'm not sure what it's called, and I don't know how many of how much of the world it affects. But have you heard about that gene in particular?
So I'm guessing you mean a vitamin D response element or VDR gene, but I'm not sure, without, there's 22,000 genes.
Exactly. and so I guess on the other side, what's the importance of the vitamin D3?
I guess one things I'll say to maybe insert a little bit of trivial pursuit details here. So with vitamin D metabolism, you hear a lot about sunlight, and sunlight is definitely important for a number of reasons, but keep in mind it helps you make the first isomer of vitamin D, right? There's a lot of more important steps to it. So just getting a little bit of sunlight doesn't mean you get to the really good stuff at the end. There's other vitamins and minerals involved with the enzymes to go from here all the way here. Mm-hmm. There's probably, I guess, maybe 9 or more isoforms or different variations of vitamin D in the body. And they probably all have some biological effect, but generally speaking, we usually focus on the 1,25 dihydroxycholecalciferol or vitamin D3 that's sort of activated, because that's the guy that's kind of connected to improved hormones and a stronger immune system and stronger bones. So that guy there, is usually what we would recommend. People take anywhere from 5,000 to 100,000 IUs of vitamin D3 per day, depending on the context of the situation. There's some interesting data. Let's say if, God forbid, something happened to you and your kidneys were damaged and you're looking for a way to jumpstart them. Some guys that think if you pop 100,000 IUs of vitamin D3, combination of injection and oral, that may help regenerate certain tissues of the body, particularly the kidneys and liver. That remains to be tested with more people, but there's some interesting data that shows it has helped some people. Mm-hmm. Now, if you don't have liver failure or kidney failure, there's probably no reason to do 100,000 IUs.
It's a lot of vitamin D.
Yeah, sure is. So normally we'd probably have someone somewhere around 5,000 to 10,000 a day, and we would measure them over time. And if we see the levels are going up, at some point we may cut them back just to keep them at a dose that can maintain those levels. A lot of my friends, they'll read some research we publish, and of course they'll approach with more is better. So if 5,000 works, 20,000 will be. I don't know if that always pans out.
Yeah. Well, with nutrients, there are upper limits, right? Because of toxicity issues.
Yeah, but you can. I'll tell you that. I would say, generally speaking, when I look at the wide range of things that people do to themselves, I would say the human body is really amazing.
Yeah.
It's adaptable.
Yeah. Well, you just I've watched guys do I've watched guys do 1,000 grams of protein a day, and they never have kidney issues. And I mean, there's no way they're using all that protein,
Yeah.
And I've watched guys pop massive doses of vitamin D or vitamin C or B vitamins, and I wouldn't encourage that behavior, but I've been able to test them and I can't find any signs of damage, Oh, I apologize. My light switched on a timer.
That's all right.
See that? I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
You can see me in the dark.
And so I guess getting or using things like the biohacks that they've come out with recently, the different light therapies that are going on. So using something like a light bar for inflammation, or more so the things you've got light earbuds from the Human Charger. There's another device, I don't know what it's called, but you put light up your nostril and wear it for a while. Do you see that they can be beneficial in regards to vitamin D, or it's not based on that at all? It's more about
Well, so first, all of those different, let's say, light-based therapies, we measure people before and after the use of many of those technologies. So I would go out on a limb and say that we collect more data than anyone in the world on these different therapies. The vast majority of them, while they have data that may support them at the time they collected that data, I don't see big impact on many people. In other words, let's say if I got $100, am I going to spend it on buying this device, or would I be better off doing something else with that money? And what happens sometimes, because of really good marketing, people are manipulated to buy something that, at its best, it may only help them for a limited time, and then it won't work anymore. So one of the things you don't really hear about is that we have receptors, and those receptors are controlled by genes. And some people have genes where certain light therapies aren't as effective for them, and other people, the light therapies may be very effective for them. So you can't look at a guy and say, hey, light for you and extra light for you, right? It's not that simple. So the way we leverage that here, because my personal philosophy is I don't want people to pay for something unless I think it will really help them, but I can't always look at you and know what you need. So when people come here, we give them, they could try tons of different therapies for free one time. And that way they can figure out for themselves what really helps them. And I could share with you, I probably have like a dozen different light therapy systems here. I got stuff that does the whole body. I got stuff that'll do just like a size of a quarter, like a diameter on your skin. So it allows us to experiment. And right now, we're using a combination of very powerful electrical muscle stimulation with light therapy, and we're getting really amazing results. We do combine some neurology type exercises, like exercise for the brain, and people that can't walk, they're walking. People that can't raise their arm and they can do full motion, and it's without surgery, and it's without supplementation or medication. So, I've known for a lot of research I did in dietary supplements, but I'm really I personally don't want to be a prisoner where I have to take something for life. Psychologically, it just doesn't resonate well with me. I want to take what I want to take because I choose to, not because I'm forced to,
Yeah, definitely. It's so interesting that you say some people are responsive and some people aren't, because we actually bought a human charger about a year ago, maybe just under, and I get massive benefit from it, whereas Maddie's like, meh.
I definitely feel a difference, but I think I'm not sure if it's placebo or if it's actually because it's working. And that's where it becomes tough with something
Whereas
like that.
I know that I have MTHFR and COMT gene mutations. We haven't had Maddie tested, but he's pretty resilient and solid.
Bounce off everything.
But maybe it's because my body needs help clearing toxins that I get I'm more receptive to the light therapy.
Sure. Which device did you get? You said human charger. Is that the name of it?
Yeah.
In the ears, the Valkyrie.
Valkyrie. Yeah. They've got some studies, but a lot of the studies are actually done by the company itself, which makes you wonder, is it obviously then biased? I don't know. I would say it does work for both of us, but Stace definitely gets more of an effect for it than what I do.
So I get maybe thousands of different devices marketed to my center each, month or so. So I heard of biocharger. I have not heard of human charger. Okay. So you're educating me now, So I'll have to take a look at it. We purchase a lot of devices to test, so that way we can look at it ourselves. There's no bias. I don't care if it works or it doesn't work. I have no vested interest in any of these technologies. So if they work, great. If they don't work, I don't really care. It's a matter of trying to I want to be able to figure out how to get the right tool, because it's clear as day. I'll give you some example, like hot versus cold. I have one guy come in, put some heat on him, he feels amazing. Next guy with the same problem comes in and the heat does nothing for him at all, but cold works for him, right? And so, there's probably going to be at some point in the future, we'll be able to have some simple way of knowing what's the best therapy for each person. But right now, a lot of it's still trial and error. Try it yourself and see what you feel. Do you guys do any type of on the spot assessments for your clients? Like, let's say right now, if you're going to do a therapy, how would you determine if that therapy is a threat to your nervous system or a boost to your nervous system? Do you have anything like that you do?
We base most of our stuff over the internet, so unfortunately sometimes we never get to meet the individual, but we're more of a starting point for Gen Pop so that they can create a baseline.
All right, so let's just say right now, if you were going to say, Tom, I want you to use this human charger product that you don't know anything about, right? So we want to see if it helps you. So I could, stand in the anatomical position, so like face, palms, and feet forward. I know I'm sitting, so I'm violating what I'm telling you right now. So
we'll
I
imagine it.
Yeah, thank you. You have to work with me here. So imagine you're in this anatomical position, and I could simply touch my toes, let's say 3 times. So I get a sense of just overall global postural tone, right? Mm-hmm. And it's 3 times. The idea, within 3 tries, I should get a warm-up effect and kind of know where I'm at versus normal. Now let's say I go use a human charger. Now I go back and I test myself 3 times, and just, is there an immediate improvement? Mm-hmm. And the idea behind that is you can actually create your own test of using your own anatomy, whether you're squatting or deadlifting or doing a power clean, and just see, how did that movement or how did that therapy affect my nervous system right now? Mm-hmm. It's certainly not perfect, but it's a great way to get a sense of, let's just say, if you're squatting and after every set you're getting tighter and tighter, there's a threat to your nervous system. You may feel great, though. You may feel like the adrenaline rush, like I want to bang out 10 more sets. But maybe at that point, 3 sets is all you need, and to do more is not a good idea. So now a lot of times women are more flexible than men. So I have women coming in there palming the ground, so they can't go through the floor. So we then might do something like an internal external rotator cuff test, where they'll be like 90 degrees in the shoulder and the elbow, and they just internally, externally rotate, and they'll just test both sides and see qualitatively which side is stiffer. Let's just say it's the right side. Then they could do that before and after that, say human charger test or treatment. And if they get dramatic improvement in range of motion, the interpretation would be, this is a positive input onto your body. So it might be, something to use, because you don't have to be there, right? You could just coach them over Skype or,
Absolutely.
And it's a great way. It's helpful.
And is that from your kinesiology background? Or is this just stuff you kind of identified from working with people over the years?
So I would say a little bit of both. So kinesiology for me was more like nutritional biochemistry. Mm-hmm. So I was from a Western program, not like an alternative or complementary program. So back then, so in the States, I don't know how it is, in other countries, but it started out as like physical education. Well, then everyone has physical education. You thought of, well, you're a gym coach, right? But meanwhile, you had scientists and athletic trainers, personal trainers, exercise physiologists. But because it's called physical education, everybody identified as a gym coach. So then they changed it to like health education. Then it became exercise and science, and then it became kinesiology. Now it's kind of floated all over the place. But basically, in the program I was in, is really more exercise physiology and biomechanics. And then because I wanted to add the nutrition to it, I basically, studied the effects of different substances on the endocrine responses to lifting weights. Mm-hmm. So we were one of the first groups to put people on creatine monohydrate. Back then they were saying, don't take creatine, it'll blow up your kidneys, But this, was back in the early 90s where there was a lot of fear about taking any supplements. And today there's not as much fear, but there's still a lot of wacky stuff said, response to taking certain things.
And creatine is one of those that actually does have a very positive effect, right? Like that's one of the main proven ones these days.
Yeah, so so structurally, it's an amino acid, but functionally it's like a carbohydrate. So once it gets inside of a muscle cell, the enzymes put a phosphate molecule on it, so the creatine monohydrate becomes creatine phosphate. And as a result of that, water goes into the cell, which is supposed to happen. That's what you want. Mm. Anytime amino acids or ions go in the cell, you want more water in the cell. The healthiest people in the world have the largest amount of water in their cells. They have better hydration status. Mm. What happened is early on, they would say, oh, it just makes you absorb more water, which is not even true, because absorption, is from the digestive tract into the blood. We're really talking about intracellular utilization. We're talking about more water going inside the cell, not really absorption. And so anyway, there was a lot of misinformation. The wrong terms were being used, But what happened is they would say, well, your total body water goes up, therefore it's just water weight, so it doesn't really count. But anytime you eat anything and those macromolecules get broken down to, the components like amino acids and fatty acids and monosaccharides, they make their way into your cell. That's the whole idea of it, getting smaller so it could get through. and water is supposed to passively follow the concentration gradient. And as really good work by Dietrich Hosinger from Denmark showed that people that are dying have the least amount of water in their cells in various disease states. So basically, you could look at it, different ways, but the most unhealthy people have the least amount of water in their cells, and the most healthy people have the most amount of water. So one of the things I'm looking at right now is, irregardless of your diagnosis of disease or irregardless of your sport, like some guys might play volleyball and some guys may race cars, and they have totally different perspectives of the demands of the sport. But what if we could increase intracellular hydration? What does that translate to? In theory, it would make anyone better or healthier. And it's stuff no one's really considering because it'd be so cheap.
Yeah.
It would eliminate a lot of more expensive stuff.
That's super interesting.
Yeah, that's really profound.
I guess looking at even disease state people, like it would potentially be worthwhile dropping some creatine monohydrate while they're in that state, because obviously it's going to intracellularly.
Water where it needs to
exactly.
go.
That's very interesting.
I'll tell you though, if I had a patient at hospital, and if I went to a hospital here in the States and said, "Hey, I'd like to give him creatine," they would shoot me on the spot and arrest me. They would not let me. They would not like that. So there's definitely resistance to thinking.
Hopefully 5 years down track they'll come around. Hey?
Yeah.
It's usually the way. So I guess getting into more of the disease state, my dad actually suffered from cancer last year. He had non-Hodgkin lymphoma. And something that he went through was chemo eventually. Like he pretty much got
resistant to it at first.
Yeah, but he got rid of he put the cancer at a state where he didn't have to worry about it, and then his diet went out the window, and all of a sudden the cancer grew back, bigger and larger than before. So he had to go in and he had to have chemo. So he started looking at nutrition again. Once he started chemo, his body obviously went into shutdown mode because chemo just wants to kill things. And he lost a heap of weight, and at that point he finally came to us and said, "Hey, I think I need some help with nutrition," which was really cool, because everything beforehand we kind of have to just bite our tongues to some extent. And it's like, okay, because my dad in particular, he's not going to listen unless
he asks for help.
Exactly. And so when he asked, we were over the moon. So we started helping him, but at that point it was just about keeping weight on for him, and so it was trying to get him just to eat. And even then, he didn't want to eat. He had the aversions to food. He didn't want to eat at all, especially straight after chemo. He had the stages where he was so nauseous, like he'd vomit for the whole week afterwards every time he'd ate, and so it's just pretty similar stuff. So increasing zinc at that point obviously really helped him as well, because it just got rid of the nauseous feeling, which is crazy. But
because it normally does the opposite.
Yeah, something that you talk about is best diets for cancer. Is there something that you find actually really works well for people of, I guess, and there's different stages of cancer. Maybe we could talk about the 4 stages of cancer firstly, and then go into the diet for cancer as well.
Yeah. So first, let me just share with you, my own mother doesn't listen to me. Okay. So it's tough when you deal with family because your family sees you as someone other than the professional you are, right? They're just like this kid over here that I raised. You're not like a professional, So, and it's a tough battle because I've had to see a lot of people I love in my family do silly things that I wish, I could have changed, but I couldn't. Now, in terms of, nutrition and cancer, there's not really a single diet that'll work for everyone, no matter where they are in the different stages or even the different types of cancers. And one of the reasons is that the way we define cancer, generally speaking, I don't know if it's accurate. Like, cancer is diagnosed based on geography for the most part. So if I have a cancer in my brain, it's a brain cancer. If I have a cancer somewhere in my digestive tract, maybe a colon cancer or something. The problem with that is the cells can mutate, and they could have properties of other types of cancers other than where they've been diagnosed. And that's why it's kind of difficult to just, wipe them all out at one time. Now, the thing about, chemotherapy is the reason why chemotherapy is so powerful and toxic is because prior to chemotherapy, nothing worked. So imagine if you were a physician and you got all these patients with cancer you're trying to help, and you're just watching them die. They're trying everything and they're just dying. In your mind, you're thinking, I need like an atomic bomb here. I need a nuclear weapon that'll blow everything up, and just hope they survive the aftermath because there were no better options at the time. Now, because we have better methods for research and better methods of testing people, and there's more awareness of the impact of like cigarette smoking on lung cancer, right, and the environment on our health, now because there's more global awareness of certain things, we know that there's ways to maybe do things better than just chemotherapy by itself. But there are still probably some cancers where a small amount of chemo might be a quick win without, a lot of the expense and time doing other things. But in terms of like a healthy lifestyle, things that can make immediate impact, probably the number one thing is sleep or sleep cycle. I don't know if this has made this around the world because I'm not so knowledgeable about every country and the laws and stuff. But in the United States right now, sleep is considered, if you work a graveyard shift, so it would be 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., that's considered a risk factor for cancer. Mm-hmm. So people that work like nurses, for example, or doctors that work in the hospitals at night, people that work in restaurants or in other types of industries where there may be diners working all night long and stuff. So it's known that there's a much greater incidence of a variety of cancers. Other things would be lack of sunlight exposure seems to increase risk. Low vitamin D seems to increase risk. Certainly, certain chemicals in the environment appear to increase risk for cancer. On the nutrition side, generally speaking, we try to recommend everyone consume diets with lots of color, so lots of fruits and vegetables. I don't think being a pure vegan is the healthiest way to go. And the reason is that I've tested lots of vegetarians and I did not think they were healthy. Although on the outside they were very lean, but visually they would look really good. But internally, I don't think that would be the sort of blood profile I would want for myself or someone else.
I think that's a common misconception, right?
Yeah, I think that one argument could be made. Let's just say, like right now, I was eating a lot of red meat, and let's say I'm eating pounds of red meat every day, and now I get colon cancer. What I do know is whatever I was doing now was a contributing factor. So one strategy might be just to stop doing what I was doing before and clean everything up. Maybe avoid red meat entirely. That might be a simple way. And the rationale is I was doing so much of that one thing, maybe that had some impact. But I would have no way of knowing, right? Unless there's no way of seeing, did that meat affect my microbiome and damage my DNA and my colon to cause the cancers? We don't know that. So, but there are definitely some prudent decisions that could be made. And so for safe, like a balance of safety, security, and results, we would tell people eat a wide variety of food. Pick foods, instead of going like ketogenic from a fear of carbohydrate perspective, I would tell people to pick foods that have very low glycemic load. And the idea behind that is it lets them get the benefits of a ketogenic diet, but the distribution of all the micronutrients are found with colorful fruits and vegetables from the environment. So it's kind of like a balance of all worlds, right? Yeah. So that way you get all the micronutrients you need to help your healthy cells get healthier and help prevent excessive problems from chemotherapy or radiation if someone's doing that. And that would be a safe way to go. One of the things to watch out for is, when someone does have cancer is excessive weight loss. And so in extreme cases, it's kind of like we have these guidelines, but if someone's losing weight rapidly, then it's kind of like we got to do whatever we can to get energy into this person, even if it's something unhealthy on paper, because we got to change the direction we're going, So I had a conversation the other day with someone, and they're dying. They've lost massive weight, and they don't want to eat anymore, and they have a growth in their digestive tract, and it's now growing in their esophagus. They have difficulty swallowing. And I said, "Is there anything that you do like to eat?" And the person's partner said, "Oh, he'll wolf down Egg McMuffins like there's no tomorrow." I said, "Well, that wouldn't be the first recommendation. Would be to eat more Egg McMuffins, but at this point, we can no longer be choosy, right? Because you're just losing weight way too fast. So how about this? Can I get you to eat? If I let you eat more Egg McMuffins, will you also take in some of this healthy stuff as well? As at least a way to try to get something healthier than an Egg McMuffin in them." And so I got an agreement, and sure enough, he's eating way more than ever before. So it's kind of like if you have a diabetic, you let him eat ice cream or not, because if they're eating nothing else and their diabetes are out of control, it's still not healthy that way either. So it's a challenge sometimes with each person you can't snap your fingers and magic happens and they eat everything the way you want them to.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I answered your question directly, but hopefully what I would say with cancer is we try to, in a perfect world, I would do vitamin mineral testing, microbiome testing, food allergy testing, and then come up with a nutritional recommendation based on, all of those variables in conjunction with that person's goals, or whatever, disease or performance issues they're trying to address.
Yeah. And for someone who is in a disease state, and obviously it's going to depend on what level they're at within that disease, would you recommend exercise for all? Obviously, once again, based on where they're at with their disease, but is exercise a good thing, or increasing any sort of weight exercise in particular, will that help the situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say exercise is probably the single most powerful weapon against all diseases that we know of. I think it's just largely devalued because a lot of people say, well, I was working out in the gym and I still got cancer. I was working out and I still got heart attack or something. But they assume they were doing the right thing for their body. I've always been fascinated with strength. So because of that, I would naturally want to lift weights versus run or, for distance. But genetically, maybe if I did run for distance, I would be even healthier, right? I did something because of my choice and my passion, not because it was necessarily the best thing for me. At that point in time, I had no idea what the best thing for me. Now that I have all this genetic data on myself, I see there's better things I could have chosen to do, which would have made my life easier. Like when someone says, oh, I'm having trouble losing weight, but I'm following this diet from a book, maybe that's not the right diet for them. So that could be why they're having trouble. And in terms of exercise, though, we reframe it. We don't say exercise, we say movement.
Yeah.
Because our main focus is initially for anyone. I don't care whether it's an Olympian or if it's someone that's in a wheelchair that has spinal cord injury or someone with stage 4 cancer metastasize everywhere. We want their brain to connect to the rest of their body. And there's simple things like you could even check yourselves out right now. Like, you could move your thumb independently of your other fingers. Well, children could do that with their toes, right? They can move their big toe and the rest of their toes separate. So, just the other toe, just the big toe. Many adults can't do that. So they lost ability because of lack of use, not because there's real damage. So the body works on simple principles: use it or lose it. So imagine if you're losing function, but you're not aware of it. It gets worse over time, and all of a sudden you're like, man, I'm getting old, I'm getting stiff. It's like, well, you haven't done anything. What do you expect? If you don't do anything, you lose the ability to use it, So one of the ways to make sure you can fight aging and fight any disease process is always strive to learn to acquire new movement patterns. So simple things like, say, if I was doing a shoulder circle, I might do a tiny circle, and I might do a bigger circle, and over time I would do every letter of the alphabet. And the idea now is my brain is learning all these different motions. Now when people do it, they go, wow, it's really hard for me to make a letter A in the sky with my shoulder, And then you say, well, why is that? Well, because you've never done it before. You don't know that you can't control the muscles in that range of motion because you don't experience it. See light go on now?
Yeah, back on. Is that for the cleaners?
Yeah, it's on a timer.
Energy saving.
Yeah, that's great. And so something that you do, what would you say the biggest mistakes when it comes to treatment for cancer or treatment for disease are that are commonly seen?
Well, so people read something on the internet and they think they know what they need for a treatment, and they're kind of embracing that. And the reality is we don't really know up front what the home run solution would be for someone's treatment. And a lot of people get caught up in this concept of a cure for cancer. There's not a single thing that will work for everyone because it's like everyone's coming to the event with a different circumstance, right? So just because, think about this. We have 22,000 genes. Despite the fact there's only 22,000 genes, roughly, no two people are exactly the same. Even twins that you say, well, they're genetically identical, but their microbiome is different and the interaction with the environment is different. And that set of circumstances makes everyone so unique that not only are you the only one like yourself alive right now, you're the only one like yourself ever in history. That's pretty, significant. So now how are we going to know what everybody needs when there's so much diversity and variety? There's no possible way. So yeah, so the big mistake I think I see people making is reading something and saying, oh, I want this new drug. Well, the reality is most drugs fail because they don't work. Yeah. So the solution is not going to be to take another drug. The solution really is to figure out what's going on inside of you as a unique individual. And then if I had, let's say, a gene where I can't, methylate a B vitamin, or let's say if I can't activate a vitamin D, or let's say maybe walking would produce better results than pedaling a bicycle. Once I know those things, I can be more precise in my lifestyle, my behavior choices, versus if I didn't know those things, I could be running forever and maybe pedaling a bike would have helped me a little bit faster, types of weight loss and stuff. Yeah, one other thing that I was going to say, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, is that people thinking they could do it all themselves. That's, just having a diagnosis of cancer is so incredibly overwhelming. Just to think you could read something and know what to do afterwards, it just indicates that people just don't really realize how much information is out there, and no single mind can digest all of that and come up with a plan, which is why I have lots of people here. I'm not like a one-man show. I got a lot of docs here and a lot of other people, and I have the guys in the weight room that are doing our strength and conditioning now. They're strong men. Why? Because people want to see strong men showing strong stuff. If I don't bring in, the most flexible person to show a deadlift or a squat, because it's not as impressive, right? Yeah. But now if I want to demonstrate flexibility, I don't have the big strong guy. I got the most flexible person demonstrating, because it just visually it resonates with what you expect to see. I don't want to say, hey, look how flexible I am. I mean, I can't even touch my toes. Right? I want to bring it someone that could palm the ground.
That's good. Yeah. And so, I mean, this can be looked at depending on what you're actually looking at, but fasting. So fasting for cancer patients, but then also the other side of things where you're looking at fasting for maybe like a strong athlete as well. Can you kind of take us through both sides and what your opinion on both are?
Yeah. So a lot of the justification for, let's just say, controlled fasting, because there's a difference between starvation because you can't afford food, right? Yeah. Or you have food available. I think if I was to step back and look at all the data, under controlled conditions, energy intake, whether it's fat, carbs, or protein, always outperforms fasting when there's movement involved, right? So if you're going to run a race and you say, you don't eat and I'm going to eat, I'm going to run this marathon, right? Who do you think finishes better? The people that have some energy during the performance of the marathon. So we have kind of like the performance data, which kind of shows that there's some benefit to energy and different types of macronutrients. But then we have other data looking at stem cell mobilization or activation and intermittent fasting and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And, the thing that I look at is that when I test people, what I know is that if there are things that are missing, you don't improve that by not doing anything about it. So if your vitamin D is low, I have to get your vitamin D increased. I can't do magnetic field therapy. I can't have you pray. I can't have you meditate. I actually have to get vitamin D in your body. Mm-hmm. And when I do that, then the benefits of that vitamin D for you are pretty profound. But if I didn't know you needed vitamin D, as an example, then I wouldn't know you need more of that or how much or something. So when I'm working with people, and let's say I'm not just doing like a lecture to the general audience or something, I ask people what their preference are, and someone says, I don't really eat much in the morning and I'm hungry later in the day. I try to work with that at the beginning so that later on you have something to work with that we can modify and treat and let's just say enhance. But if someone, let's say if I have an older adult they haven't eaten breakfast in 20 years, for me to come in and say, hey, I want you to eat breakfast every day now, that's like a huge shock, right, to their culture, mindset and everything. So whether it's right or wrong is one issue, but in terms of connecting and developing trust and relationship with that person, you can't force change on people. You have to kind of work a little bit with where they're at. Now, if I had a younger, let's say, male athlete that's like, I want to win right now, I can tell that guy anything, he's going to change it right now because he wants to win and he's not worried about time. He wants results yesterday. You know? That might be a different scenario. I tend to think that most people don't select the right foods, generally speaking, and they're not aware of issues with the microbiome. So under those conditions, I think fasting might be beneficial because they may have an organism that when they eat a certain food, it gets activated. So like it creates chemicals. So now when they don't eat, that organism is kind of not active as much. And so now they feel better. So they get conditioned to thinking the fasting is beneficial. So it's really not the food per se. It's the lack of stimulation of a pathogenic organism or let's just say an organism they don't want. So one solution would be do some stool testing, kill the organism off, and then see how you feel. The healthiest people can eat the widest variety of food without any symptoms at all. And so like if someone says, oh, I can't eat, wheat or dairy or whatever now, I'd say, well, when you were a kid, could you eat it? I'd say, yeah. Well, it's something to think about. Well, what changed? Did the food supply change? Because that's possible. Mm-hmm. We know, like the United States, certain sections of the country, the selenium content of wheat is way lower than other sections. So let's say you move from one part to the other part, and let's just say, for argument's sake, you eat wheat every day, just for simplicity. Well, just by moving, you've changed your selenium intake without even knowing it, right? Because the ground provides less mineral in one area than another. Well, that stuff, most people aren't going to know that kind of thing. That's just not, common knowledge, and it's not something that most people think about. So now they may have a problem in one area that they never had before. So you might say that's from moving. Other people may have an issue like, the wheat in the United States, they allow genetically modified wheat. Mm. So they could have a problem. And it's maybe not wheat per se, it's the fact that it was genetically modified. Or you might have someone that actually did get exposed to an organism, and every time they eat wheat, they have a reaction. So the simple solution would be just avoid the wheat, right? And then you don't have the problems. But then the more detailed concern is, well, how am I getting selenium into that person's diet now? Because by eliminating the wheat, they've now also inadvertently eliminated a major antioxidant mineral. So most people won't look at the details of that strategy all the way through. They're just looking at it, how do I look in the mirror? How do I feel now? But you can't feel cancer cells growing, right? You don't know, hey, I got 5 cancer cells in me right now. You don't know that kind of stuff. So how you feel, I think, it's important to feel good about what you're doing and your energy, but it's not objective enough to give us the precise detail to make the most accurate decisions. A lot of times, I'll give you an example. Guys that compete, they could be creating arthritis in their joints, but they still feel really strong. It's not to maybe 10 or 20 years after they're done competing that they feel the consequences of the damage from that sport. Yeah. But they felt while they were competing,
So, we can't always control all factors in life. Obviously, like when we're out and about, you can't control which toxins you're getting in or which radiation or whatever else. So on a personal level for yourself at home, is there things that you specifically try to do to, I guess, mitigate your risk?
Yeah, so so this is more of a personal philosophy. I would rather eat anything I want and train like an animal in the gym as opposed to withhold something. So I'm not like a guy that eats a lot of junk food or anything like that. But if I decided, man, I want some fried chicken tonight, I'm going to have my fried chicken. Because what I've learned over time, if I don't eat something I'm looking to eat, it messes up with my head later, and I feel like I cheated myself out of something. And what I find a lot of times, if I just get a little bit, it kind of satisfied whatever craving, and then I won't need it for another 5 years or something like that, some other random time. But by training really hard, I could eat a lot of food and not get fatter or something like that. But in terms of decisions I made for my house, I focused on things like I tested the indoor air quality, see how many particles are in the air, because I live in a desert and there's very dry air here. It's very it's just very dry, and so there's a lot more particulate matter in the air. So I've invested in filtration systems, and I could see that we've brought it down dramatically. I've noticed within days that affected my breathing. Like my breathing got significantly better. And we're talking about particles you can't see, right? So I'm like wheezing. I don't know why I'm wheezing. I don't have asthma or anything. Why am I wheezing? And then I realized so much stuff in the air with the very dry air, it was having a negative effect. And then I focused on quality of the water. There's I don't know how pure the water has to be, or maybe has not to be, in order to improve health. But I know there's just so much stuff that's added to the water here, and the stuff just from, I have a house that's 30 years old. So the plumbing and everything, who knows what's leaking, because 30 years ago, they never considered that stuff. So I look at stuff like that. And then, I make sure when I sleep at night that I could breathe unobstructed. So I've had sleep apnea. Like when I was weighing about 165, I never had sleep apnea. When I got to 260, I had sleep apnea really bad.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this at the time. I didn't know, I back then, as you talk about 20, 30 years ago, I thought one of my girlfriends was choking me in my sleep. I thought maybe I pissed her off or something, Well, because it feels like when you're choking in your sleep, it feels like someone's got their hands on you. And I'd wake up looking at her, and of course she wasn't choking me, but it felt like that sensation. And at the time back then, when I would go to see a doctor and say, hey, I think I have a problem with sleeping, they would say, oh, it's nothing. There's no research on that. It doesn't mean anything. And besides, you're setting these world records, so it can't be that bad. I'm like, you don't understand. I'm waking up feeling like someone was choking me. I think that's pretty bad. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until many years later, after I was almost retired from competition, I found out I had really bad sleep apnea. And I remember I was talking to a sleep specialist, and I stopped breathing about 60 times or more per hour, wow, which was pretty high. And so he tells me, hey, man, I found some serious information, like you hardly breathe at all during a given hour. It's pretty serious. And I was like, finally, thank God. So I was happy. He's like, that's usually not the response I get. Most people are kind of like concerned. I was like, I always knew there was a problem, but I went to all these doctors and they kept telling me there's nothing wrong. And I'm like, this is not in my head. This is something I'm feeling. So there's got to be something wrong with their testing. And so now the tests have improved, and now we find this problem. Anyway, so we fixed it for me with a CPAP. And instantly, I remember I went into the gym and I was benching almost 200 pounds more in a few days. I just could feel like my strength coming back, So I don't think that CPAP is the best fit for everyone. I mean, certainly it definitely interferes with intimacy with your partner, You're not winning over anyone like that. But it's,
what do you mean bang's not sexy?
That's right, yeah. Like a little vacuum going in the background. Right? So it's one of those things, though, that it could definitely be life-changing. I think that the breathing is more important than light levels in the room. You hear a lot about light and melatonin. But remember, it's airway breathing first. Like if you can't breathe, that's oxygen. Hormones come later on down, in terms of priorities. Now, if someone can breathe, then, then I would look at things like a lot of people are sensitive to electric fields or electromagnetic fields in a room.
Yeah.
If you think about the design of a lot of homes, your headboard's usually against the wall, and there may be an electric outlet there. So, your head can literally be inside of a field. And here's where it gets really interesting. Like lots of organizations say, oh, there's no data proving that there's a problem. But we know that birds can see magnetic fields, and they avoid things naturally. So mammals can't see that, but it does appear that some people have like an extra sense of perceiving a magnetic field. So people that have trouble sleeping at night, it might simply be that they're sensitive to this signal around them. And imagine right now, imagine you never saw you never heard of a magnetic field. And I'm trying to explain something you can't see, touch, or feel. The crazy person, right? I'm trying to say, no, it's right there. You're standing in it. And you're like, sure, Tom, sure I am.
Voodoo magic, yeah.
It isn't until you have like something else that can challenge that field, so like a South Pole type of thing, or some paperclip or something to feel it. Then you would realize, wow, there is something here. Or maybe like a flux magnetometer or some device that can measure field strength or something. But without any of those tools, you'd be like, yeah, whatever,
Yeah.
And there's probably lots of things like that we're not fully aware of, but they're around us,
We actually have an anecdotal example of a lady that we were working with who was having these horrible, horrible headaches the left side of her face was like drooping every day. And she had everything else dialed in. We had looked at sleep, we'd looked at water, we'd looked at nutrition, like everything we've talked about. She was nailing all of it. And she still felt awful. And the doctors had done all these tests and couldn't find anything. And then one morning I woke up and had this epiphany. I'm like, she wears one of those Fitbit things on her wrist. She took it off, the headaches went away.
Within a day.
Within a day.
24 hours, yeah.
So she now knows that she's super sensitive to EMF and has put a lot of things in place to protect herself from that. And, you know, she posted up to try and help share her story and educate people. And everyone thought that she was lying and all this kind of stuff. So it's exactly what you say. Like, people think you're crazy, but she knew that it made her feel better. And who cares what anyone else thinks, because she's feeling better.
So that's the challenge sometimes, is that some people could be affected by something that might be healthy, right, in appearance, like keeping track of steps and energy and stuff. You know, there's also we found some people with let's just say pain that really couldn't be figured out, like why are they in pain. If they have watches or jewelry on their wrist, even something that's fairly light, it was just enough of a trigger to create a reaction. And from like a global perspective, if we would look at the nervous system and look at things like as an input and then a processing and an output, you know, it opens up the possibility that anything that touches you or affects you could affect the nervous system. And so, you know, that opens up, you know, chemicals in the environment, magnetic fields, light, sound, all kinds of things. And so there's certainly those possibilities, you know.
It almost acts as like an attractant, right? Like electromagnetic fields essentially would jump from metal to metal. So it makes sense as to why that would potentially be happening. I've got tattoos, and something that I've been warned about previously is like, okay, well, you've essentially got heavy metals in your blood then, and it can act as that exact same thing. So it's like, oh, cool. Thank you.
Well, if you ever want to do an interesting experiment with yourself, find a red light around 630 to 660 nanometers, and then just put it over one of the tattoos. Feel how hot it gets almost immediately.
630 to what? To
632 to 660. Let's say 630 to 660.
Yeah.
And then just, you know, be careful, because you don't want to burn yourself. I don't want you like punching me in the head when I see you, you know. So I want you to just put the light over and just feel it heat up, because that'll then show you that there's something in the skin, right? I mean, you obviously could see it, 'cause you can see the tattoo. But it's interesting. We use some of those same strategies for actually, let's say someone has cancer in their body, or a tumor. We give them substances to take that go to the cancer, and we use a wavelength of light over that area, and it actually creates a photodynamic effect. So the substance, kind of think of it as like blowing up like a grenade on the inside of the cancer cell. So patients like it. Some doctors are afraid of it, because they're like, I don't know where this is going, you know, once it's inside you. But it's fairly safe. I mean, I've done it on myself, and I don't even have cancer, and you don't feel anything. But someone that does have cancer, you could actually feel some warmth sometimes. And so it's an interesting observation.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, Dr. Tom, thank you so much for your time. We're going to wrap up with the final two questions. So first one being is, what is your biggest driver? Like, what gets you up and makes you do the things that you do? Like, obviously you've achieved a lot in your life so far, but what's always been the big thing that keeps you going?
So I've been driven by a sense that I don't know enough, and that before I die, I want to eliminate cancer as a threat to mankind, or humankind, I guess, to be fair to women, right? Women and men. So say humankind.
That's
massive.
Yeah, that's huge.
That's a big goal.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, the final question is around your fear. So do you have a fear that scares you?
Well, I don't know if I would say, so I was afraid of heights, and I'm the type of person that, so I went to Whistler in Vancouver in Canada, and I found out that in North America they had one of the highest zip lines and fastest zip line and longest zip line. So on the spot, I decided I would go on the zip lines, because I wanted, I'm not like a thrill seeker when I want to do stuff, anything to hurt myself or push boundaries, but I don't want to be held back by fear. So what I would like to kind of do is just, you know, embrace things that help me move forward ahead. So I would leverage my fears to motivate me to take more action.
That's unreal. Yeah, that's good.
So no more
and
fear
approaching
anymore.
Yeah.
Not scared of heights anymore. That's cool.
No, definitely not. And the funny thing was the cutoff was 250 pounds. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be too heavy to go in a zip line. It's because you have to wear all this stuff, right? It's like big boots and this parka jacket and like all these goggles and everything. And I weighed it at 249.5 pounds.
Nailed it.
Wow, it was meant to be.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's awesome. So, I mean, people can find you by listening to your podcast. So you've got 2 Ask Dr. Tom and 1-800-MAN-show. But, I mean, where else can people find you? What's the best way that people can follow along? And do you guys do online consults if someone wanted to?
Yeah, so we'll easiest way is just go to the website, causenta.com. That's CAUSENTA.com. And then there's a form that you can actually sign up for free. We do free consults. So we could say, hey, look, tell us your problem. Here's how we would approach it. Does it resonate? Does it fit? If it doesn't, no harm. Just, good luck with the direction you want to go. Because I want to help people that's a good fit both ways. Like you don't want to feel like you force something on someone, and I don't want to feel like that I can't help them and take their money. I'd rather, they go somewhere else where they could be helped better if that's, the case. And then from there, we would schedule things out. We work with people through Skype, Zoom, FaceTime. Most people, though, I'll tell you, once they come, they're like, man, I don't want to leave because it's like the bat cave here. You get all kinds of gadgets and technology. And people so people will literally be walking by, go, can I try that? Can I try that? I'm like, dude, things on your body right now. There's no more to put other stuff on you.
Oh, that's unreal.
That is awesome.
I think it would be like a big playground for humans, or for adults, right? Like getting to test all those different things.
Well, so you mentioned power athlete. So John will call up and be like, dude, you told this guy about something, and you didn't tell me about it. So I'm like, I can't tell everybody about every little thing. There's no.
That's unreal.
And he found out about it anyway, some other way. So he was then calling you. Yeah.
That's like, hey, so what if you were number 4 instead of number 1? Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, Dr. Tom, thank you so much, man. This has been actually super insightful, really good, and I think our listeners are going to get a heap out of it. So thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. And, if you come to Scottsdale, you got to hook me up. Come by and we'll get you a tour and everything. Okay?
I'd love to. That'd be
really cool.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Absolutely, guys. All right, have a wonderful day, okay? I'll catch you up later.
You too.
Likewise,
thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.